Hey YouTube, this is Eric from Thump'em Fishing, and I know you see me do a lot of striper fishing, and hopefully if you watch my channel you'll know I love to do a lot of tuna fishing. So this is my buddy Mike.
Hey everybody.
And you probably seen him in a few videos. I fished with him on Texoma with Lean from Constant Pursuit Outfitters. We've also fished with you and your son Mike. I know we went out and caught a bunch of fish a couple times, so that's been really fun. But what we're getting ready to do is we're going to get ready to go out and go tuna fishing. Mike's never had a chance to go out tuna fishing with me. We're going to be going out on the new Buccaneer. So as you can imagine, as a new person, never done this before, he's got like a million questions. So I thought it'd be cool to have him come in, kind of ask some of the questions. I'll try to answer them for him and for you, so you can check it out. That way when you do go out on the new Buccaneer, you kind of know what to expect and know what you're getting into.
Hold on, I'll be right there. Wait.
Oh my god! You guys got this!
I actually see him here on the radar. So rot it down, rot it down.
So Mike, I'll turn it over to you. I know you had a couple questions. What are some of them?
Well, first one I think would be helpful for everybody, myself included, is to know kind of what type of tackle we need to be using to go out there for different species of tuna, and what is essential to have a successful fishing trip.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think number one, just to level set everyone, the new Buccaneer does provide tackle, but what they provide is like a Penn Senator reel, and it's on a heavy boat rod. So that's fine if you're bottom fishing for vermilion, if you're trying to catch some grouper. But once you start to chase tuna, it's a little bit more specialized. Now, the boat pole itself you can use for chunking, and if there's enough line, you can also use it for jigging. But me personally, I use 3 different sets of tackle to go for tuna, and what I'll talk about is it really depends upon what the fish are doing, because it's not how you want to catch fish, it's how the fish are out there and how they want to be caught. So number one, the first thing that I'm looking for as we're actually heading out to the tuna rig is I'm sitting out on the side of the boat and I'm looking to see if there's a lot of bait in the water. If you see flying fish jumping out of the water on your way out to the rig, that's always a good sign. Tuna love flying fish, it's one of their favorite foods, and they'll feed on them in the daytime. At night, the flying fish are attracted to the rigs. The tuna will feed on them at night, and it's easy to see. You'll see the flying fish jump out of the water, it'll skip, and then land, and then boom, this big, huge explosion, because those tuna will follow right underneath it, and the second it hits the water, boom, they're all over it. So when I see that, then my number one favorite thing to throw is actually a popper. If you think about throwing a popper, this is a striker tackle popper. You throw it out of the water, you pop, wait a few seconds, pop, wait a few seconds, pop. It's just like that fish skipping, that fish will sit, and that tuna will come up and hammer it, and they'll come up and hammer your popper too, and literally they will jump. I've had one tuna jump 6 feet out of the water and land on top of a popper. Once you see that, I hate to tell you buddy, but you're hooked. You'll never want to do any other type of fishing besides tuna fishing. So number one thing is the popper, but that's only if and only if you're seeing fish busting on the surface. If they're not busting on the surface, then what you want to do is switch out to a different bait. So I just bought these slip rigs, and this is what they look like. I'll actually show you a close-up here. This is one that I use for bluefin fishing, but it's the same concept. And I have a ball bearing swivel on here. You can use a ball bearing swivel to switch your lures out, or you can just use that split rig, and basically all you do is you run it through, pop it off, and you put on your next lure. So the other favorite lure of choice for topwater action, throwing casting rods, is a Halco. So this is a Halco. You can see I've replaced the hooks. So these are Owner ST66-220 hooks. I like the blue colors, but I have every color because you never know what the tuna are going to be keying in on. But once you put your Halco on, that's the next lure that you want to use. And the nice thing about a Halco is you can work all the different depths of the water column. So you can throw it out and start reeling before it hits the water, and basically bring it in, right at the very, very top of the water. That's the first thing you can do. You can throw it out and count down 5 seconds and then reel it. You're going to go a little bit deeper. You throw it out and count down 60 seconds, go way deep, and then reel it across. So that's the nice thing about the Halco. It gives you the ability to cover lots of water and a tutor any depth in the water.
There's the yellowfin. Did not like that. There he is. Black. Nice black.
Throw Halcos. I use a topping rod, so This is actually a blue sniper from Yamaha Blanks. It's a blackie. So this is actually an 8-foot rod. I've got it rigged up with an 18 series Stella. And for yellowfin, you really don't need a Stella. This is the same rod and reel I use for bluefin. So I have heavier equipment than what you need. You could probably get by with a Gosa. I've even used a Spheros. And you can go a little bit smaller. You can go, I would probably not go lower than an 18K on poppers, just because you may get into those 100, 120 pound school and they will run out a lot of line. If you hook a feisty tuna, it's going to rip out quite a bit of line, even under heavy drag. But that's what I throw. And what I do, the way I have it rigged up, I basically have a wind on leader, but I've shortened it very short. So it's only really, what I try and do is I try and keep it so when the braid is at the top of my eye up here, when the braid's all the way up here at the top of the eye, what I want to be able to do is make sure that my knot, which is connecting my braid, my wind-on knot, is outside of my eyes. So I try and keep it outside the eyes. So it would be all the way up here. That gives me the maximum castability because I'm not having the friction of the line rubbing through the eye. And then to do that, you want your lure to be somewhere around right here on your rod. So when you throw out, you don't have to worry about hooking someone or hooking yourself. So that's the number one thing I use is the popping rod. The challenge is that tuna aren't always going to be on top. There's going to be sometimes you're going to go out there and it's going to be dead calm, no fish action whatsoever. So that's when you're going to want to go deep. And there's two ways to go deep. I use jigging rods or trunking rods. This is one of my speed jig rods. So this is a little bit heavier reel. For if I was using a Stella, this would be a 20K Stella. This is actually a Daiwa. I think it's a 7000. So it's a pretty heavy, it's a pretty beefy reel. The difference is this is indicator braid. So what indicator braid does is it changes color every so many feet. So this one will change color every 100 yards or every 300 feet. So as you're dropping it, you're watching it. It changes color once, you're 100 or 300 feet, drop it again to 600 feet. So that's telling you exactly how deep your lure is. And that's important when you're jigging because they'll have a sonar on the new Buccaneer. You may see fish at 400, you may see fish at 600. You want to put your jig down where those fish are, and that's what's going to get them to bite. So if you're fishing at 250 and a fish are at 300, they may or may not come over and hit your jig. You want to drop it right at 300. So this reel, the spinning reel, is really something I use for what I call speed jigs, and I'll show you what that is here in a second. The other reel I use is a conventional reel. So this is a Shimano Osa Jigger 4000, and the interesting thing about this reel is it has a huge amount of line capacity. There's actually 600 yards of braid on here, but you can see it's very narrow. So the spool itself right here is very narrow, so that's designed for jigging, so that you're dropping, you're keeping your finger on the line, you're reeling, you're jigging, you're working your way up. So these narrow reels are really good. If you get a big conventional like the Penn Senators on the boat, they're pretty wide. So it's not that you can't jig with them, that's just not the most comfortable way to jig with that big heavy reel. So these narrow spinning, narrow faced jigging reels are really what you want, and you get the size based on the amount of line you want to have on it. The types of jigs I use, if I had to say what are my 5 favorite jigs, I'll tell you that these are the ones I catch the most fish on. The number one jig that I use, I wish I could tell you what it is, but I don't know. This was actually given to me by a deckhand on the new Buccaneer on like my first or second tuna trip. The interesting thing is when he gave it to me, it was pink. As you can see, it's now white, and then I painted over it, and now it's white again. So this jig has caught, I can't tell you how many fish. I know one day I caught 14 fish in a row with this jig. So it just like every cast, 14 casts in a row I had a tuna. So it works really, really well. It's just a small, basically like a Williamson Herring Jig. But it's a small jig, it's not very heavy, and you can catch a lot of fish with it.
Nice.
So that's typically the first thing I'll drop, and usually what I'm trying to catch with that is actually blackfin. I want to catch blackfin for bait, so I can cut them up and use it for chunk to catch tuna. Okay. The other speed jig I like to use is this Williamson Benthos jig. This is probably my next favorite jig, and this comes in 2 colors. This is the chartreuse, but I also have, I think I have a pink one. These are new pink ones that I've used, and then I've got one that's a little bit more battle scarred. And what I do sometimes is I'll put a hook on the bottom and a hook on the top. So you can see this one's been shredded by a few tuna along the way. But these are really good jigs. You drop them down. These are speed jigs, so you're jigging them fast, moving them through the water column. And then what my buddy Neil has a tendency to do, if the fish are at 400 feet, he drops at 400 feet and he just jigs it up and down, and then boom, he catches tuna. The last trip we were on, you could catch a tuna every cast with these. Just drop them down, reel it up, and boom, you got a fish on.
Maybe. All right, Neil, way to go.
That's my third.
Third? Holy crap.
The other jig that works really, really well, and I've seen more yellowfin caught on these, are these Flatfall jigs. So Shimano makes them, but this is actually a striker tackle jig. So I like this. The nice thing about this is, after you've been jigging for a while, you get worn out. You start flipping these out, because these you pretty much just let sink down to a certain depth, and then you can reel them up. You can raise your rod tip up and just let them sink, raise your rod tip up and let them sink. So these have a tendency to flutter from side to side as they're falling. They fall a little bit slower, and the tuna will hit these as well, and it helps keep you from getting worn out. Another jig that I like a lot, and I was getting Tuna hammer on 360 Tuna showed me this. It's this glow-in-the-dark hammer jig. We fished on a trip, and we really didn't catch a ton of yellowfin. I think he caught a double limit, so he caught 6 on this hammer jig. And he fishes this similar to a flutter jig, just throwing it out, let it drop, jerking the rod up, and just letting it sink. He did really well on that jig. And then, jig that I recommend, and one of the things to keep in mind when you're fishing out there is you never know what the current's going to be. So the current could be really, really light, or it could be ripping, and the way you tell is if you drop your 7-ounce jig and your line's going like this, you know your jig's falling the way it's supposed to. If your line's going like that, what that means is that current's ripping it, it's drifting it way out away from the boat. And if you think about what's happening with the new Buccaneer is all lit up. So you pull up to the rig's lit up, the fish are all there, but up comes the new Buccaneer, this new bright light. All of a sudden the fish start to gravitate towards that, the bait goes with it, the tuna goes with it. As the boat drifts away, those fish are drifting away with the boat. The problem is if your jig is really light, it's getting out past the light, it's getting out away from the boat. You want these heavy jigs to go down and be right there where those fish are. And you can see, this is an OTI Jaeger. It's pretty battle scarred as well, but it's a 400 gram jig. So it's basically a 14-ounce jig that you're dropping down. So you never want to use that unless the current's bad. But if the current's bad, you have to have those heavy jigs to get down where the fish are. So that's the other thing I like to use. Those are kind of the critical things. And then the last thing I would say is a chunking rod. So again, I use my conventional jigger, but what I do is you just use a small circle hook. So this is probably a 3/0. These are packs of 2/0. But these are what you want. You want these small circle hooks, and what you do is you take the tuna, if you catch a blackfin, you fillet it, you cut it up into squares, and if the current's ripping, you want to use big squares, like 3x3, 4x4 to be heavier to get down. If the current's light, you cut them into smaller squares, but you basically cut your square of tuna, and then you take a fillet knife and you go right underneath the skin, between the skin and the meat, you make a little groove, and then you take your circle hook, you stick it in that groove, embed it in the meat, so that circle hook's completely buried and you can't see the hook. And then what you do is you grab like 5 or 6 chunks of tuna, and the tuna with your hook in it, you give yourself some slack, you throw them all together into the water, let them hit as a group, and then you pull a line off so that you're free line, and just let that bait float away with that group. And what will happen is this tuna will come, they'll see that group of baits, they'll start eating them, and next thing you know, boom, your line takes off, you just wait a second, boom, set the drag, and then start fighting fish. Right. So those are the tackle you need, and those are the techniques you need to catch fish. Long answer to a short question, but hopefully that's helpful.
Going back to the topwater fishing, when we're using the topwater tackle, any particular type of reel action that's more successful for catching big tuna?
I think some reels have different levels of retrieve, like they'll have a high speed reel, a low speed reel. Definitely go with the higher speeds if you can, because your goal is to cover water fast, and your goal is to skip and make it look like that bait is super active and if something's chasing it, that's what brings the fish to you. So that's generally what I recommend is if you do buy something like Stellas or things that come with multiple speed options, go for the high speed reel.
Right. Good. For a novice like myself going out there, I'm sure everybody else might want to know this too. What's to be expected on the boat first time on an overnight excursion offshore in terms of personal pack out for gear that any fisherman should have, as well as personal hygiene type of equipment that we should bring as well.
Yeah, so number one, the way the bunk situation is there's a table that has a bench. The bottom of the bench is something you can sleep on, and the tables with benches in the middle, they actually fold up. So basically the back of the bench folds up and becomes a bunk. So you're basically 2 bunks on one side of the bed, 2 bunks on the other, or you're just laying down on the benches. So it's Spartan, but it beats the back deck of a tank, man. So it's it's more comfortable than that. The AC on that boat is kicking, so I definitely recommend a sleeping bag, a blanket, something warm to keep you warm while you're in the boat. And then the kind of stuff I'm wearing: long sleeve fishing shirts because you're going to be out in the sun. You want bandanas, you want sunscreen, everything to protect your face. And then I always recommend closed-toed shoes. I wear shrimper's boots, as white shrimper's boots is what I like to wear. That way my feet don't get wet, but there's going to be hooks, there's going to be kingfish flying over the bow, there's going to be tuna flopping around with treble hooks in their mouths. Any type of protection protects your feet. Keep them safe while you're out there. From a food standpoint, there's food on the boat. There's always a cook. They do grill food, they do hamburgers, hot dogs, just normal type of grill food. I personally like the food. I actually have to control myself so I don't eat too much while I'm out there, believe it or not. But yeah, the food's really good. You can bring your own food if you so choose, but there's no refrigerator, so you got to pack stuff that will stay dry. In your soft side cooler, you can't bring a hard side cooler for safety reasons. Don't want a bunch of hard side coolers flying around in rough seas. But you can bring your own food. I eat the grill food. It's reasonably priced. It tastes really good, and that way you can focus on fishing and not have to worry about bringing all your other stuff. And then there is not a shower on the boat, but there is a bathroom. I would just bring bottled water, toothbrush, brush your teeth, bring some baby wipes. Typical. I'm an ex-Army guy, so typical field stuff that we would do from a personal hygiene standpoint.
In terms of the cooler, that's kind of another question. When we're catching fish, which hopefully everybody that goes on a trip like this wants to be doing, do they provide ice pack out for the fish, or is that going in your cooler as well?
Yeah, no. There's actually like 4 or 5 big, ginormous ice chests on there. And what they do, as you're fishing, you have basically a piece of metal with a rope on it, and it has a number on it. So if you're fishing spot 65, it's numbered spot 65. As you're catching vermilion, whatever, they'll just run those onto your stringer and basically throw your stringer into the ice chest. So as you're catching fish, they're putting them on your stringer, they're putting them on ice right away. Well, if you catch a big fish like a grouper or a tuna, they'll actually give you some when you get on board. You'll have a bunch of papers with 65 marked on it, and when you catch a fish, they'll staple it on that gill plate and then throw that fish into the cooler as well. When you catch tuna, they actually gut them and put them in an ice slurry for a little bit, and then they take them out and then they put them on ice. So they're trying to chill that tuna, protect your meat, so that when you get home, it's just amazing fresh ahi, just unbelievably good.
Right.
Yeah, 2 things I'd recommend, or a couple things I'll recommend. Number 1, I like to use these yummy flying fish. This one's been around a while. I've got to put them under a hair dryer and straighten his wings back out. But that's a good one to throw out there and just let sit and kind of float with the current if they're hitting on flying fish. Another thing is either a belt or some kind of Cushman that when you hook a fish, you have the ability to put your rod in there. This isn't a Southern California boat where you can put your rod on the rail. You've got to move quickly back and forth, so you want to have a belt to hold your rod. And then if you're prone to seasickness or you're not prone to seasickness, either way, I recommend getting a patch. I see people, I've been on trips where people have been out there and they get seasick, and guess what? They just spent a lot of money to be miserable for a 24 to 36 hour period. So I always recommend either the patch or whatever kind of seasick medicine you're going to take. Just remember that if you take the patch, you want to put it on. Like I put it on the day when we leave to go to Galveston, I'll put it on, so if we leave at 10 p.m., I've already put it on. So by the time I get on the boat, it's been on there for 8 or 9 hours or 10 hours. So that's already starting to kick in. So I'd recommend that. And then I personally, from a tackle standpoint, I like wind-on leaders. So I use braid, and I'll do loop connections so that I can just attach a wind-on leader. There's lots of knots out there to tie mono to braid. But if you've been up since 10 o'clock the night before and you've been fishing all day and you're like smoked, sometimes it's even the simplest knot's hard to tie. So I remember that too. So there's just a couple pointers for people that I personally like. Again, it's up to you, it's your tackle. But if you're going out there and you're trying to do this for the first time, you don't have to spend a ton of money on these rods. If you can find them, the Shakespeare Tiger Light rods, they're like 70 bucks, are perfect. You can go with a Penn, you can go with Shimano Spheros, they're like 100 bucks for a reel. And then I would recommend get good line, Daiwa boat braid, Daiwa tough line, and an indicator braid is good for your jigging rods. And then just any kind of smooth casting braid is good, Power Pro. I actually use Cigar, which is incredibly expensive, but when you touch that line, you know, this is super soft, super supple line. It's 50-pound test with 80-pound breaking string. So I'm using that to chase bluefin, which is why I invest heavily in the line. But that's all you need, you know, get you a few of the jigs I mentioned. Those jigs are probably 10 to 15 bucks a piece. Definitely get a few Halcos, get a couple poppers, but you don't need a ton of tackle. I know I've got all my goodies out here, but this is usually what I take with me on my boat. Is I've got just this little Home Depot case. I've got jigs on one side, I've got poppers and Halcos on the other, and that's all you need. You don't need a extensive tackle box. So Mike, you know, thanks for all the questions. Hope you're looking forward to it. Hope we, you know, we'll take some video out there. Hopefully you all see us catch a few fish. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to me on YouTube. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. Please, 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 you know, leave a comment. Let me know if you like the video. Let me know what else you want to see. And hopefully we'll see y'all out on the water. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.